Thanks for being here. Hopefully some of you were at the little thing I just did. I was literally just standing just here and I just showed this slide. So if there's some deja vu in this talk, it's because it's the same topic. That's how they wanted to roll here though, and it just means that you care about DX, so good for you. I feel like that's a good thing. It's just gonna be some more examples, look at a little more code, a few more real world things, see what we can learn about DX. It did occur to me, depending on the audience sometimes, you're like, have you heard of DX? And you're like, is that like, I heard Express is old. Is it a new node server? No, it just means developer experience. Just an acronym. I don't mind it though, I do kind of like it. I like when you take a big topic like UX and you hone it in a little bit and shave off some of the edges. A little focus doesn't hurt anybody, I think. So DX is just what we're talking about, general term. My name's Chris Coyer. I'm an opinionated developer myself. So I feel like the reason I'm mostly interested in DX is because I'm a picky bastard about it. So I like thinking about it. Didn't apply a ton of scientific rigor to this. I feel like the world of UX it's relatively scientific. You run UX tests and you have a methodology and you publish the results and stuff. DX, a little more squishy. It's kind of like, I like that, good job. So I don't have any whatever scientific cred for this thing, but I'm a picky bastard myself, and technically my co-founder at CodePen is the CTO, but together we choose tools to make sure that we're providing good DX for the team, right? Because that can happen. You can be delivering crappy DX just from your manager or whatever, we're gonna use Drupal or whatever. And then, no, that's rude, Drupal's great. And then we make a product that's for developers too, so we better care about DX, right? I've been plucking away at CodePen for 15 years, so that's a heck of a thing. I'm gonna repeat these principles that we talked about in the keynote, where there's DX. I like to think, how we scope down UX to talk about DX, we're gonna scope down the fact that I think about DX is a relatively narrow pathway. A developer has in mind a job to be done. We'll get into that. I need to have our continuous integration do a new thing. So you look at a tool, and then when you're looking at that tool, this is what's happening. Are you able to do it? Are you able to use that tool to do the thing that you want to do? No, you bail, you look at some other tool. So first, that's the first thing that goes through your mind with DX is, can I do the thing? Do your docs clearly show? No, it's weird, it's convoluted, I'm out. I'm gonna look at something where it's clear that I'm able to do the job that I'm trying to do. Better is then once I've proven that it can do it, that it's obvious and easy how to do the thing. It's not convoluted or twisted or weird to figure out. It's just it's obvious to do the thing. And then, better than that, is it fast and satisfying to do it? I'm able to do it, it was obvious to do it. Does it cook when it does it? Is it ooh, that was nice? That's what I'm looking for. That's usually the DX part. When people think of good DX, they're coming in on layer 3 there. That's good DX because it's fast, because it's satisfying in some way to use the product. And then if anything goes wrong, crucial part of this whole DX thing is what is it like when it fails? What's the error state? Is it actionable? Is it not just clear why the error happened, but what can I do about it? And is there help available to me? So kind of 4, they're not really steps, but they're kind of layers of DX or things that I think about generally with DX. I want to start with creating and editing HTML, not because you all necessarily deeply care about that, but because it ends up making a good example and sort of straw man that we can point at too. As a basic example, I just want to literally my job to be done is I'm gonna write an HTML file. So what's a tool I could use if I'm thinking about DX? It just so happens on my computer, it doesn't ship with anything particularly good for it. There happens to be a product on my Mac called TextEdit, but it's really kind of for rich text and whatever. You kind of can get the job done, but it's not that great. For one thing, you open the thing, and by default, it's in rich text, meaning I can bold and set fonts and drag images and crap in there like Microsoft Word. So I have to know to go into settings settings and switch it over to plain text. And then once I do that, it stops with the rich text formatting stuff and I can use it. But then you go save a document as like index.html, and it's like, are you sure? Because normally it's txt, and it does that every single time you try to save an HTML file. There's no like, it's cool, it's HTML button. So right away, they're like, are you able to do it? Yes. Is it satisfying in any way? Absolutely not as a tool. And then even if you can get it done, it's doing literally nothing for us for writing HTML. You just have to type each character and just whatever. That's rough. Nobody does that. That's why I mean it's kind of a straw man. It's not like you're all out there writing HTML like this, but just to show you that you can. It's a bit silly. Nobody actually does that. This is the CodePen kind of 2.0 product that we're working on, the interface for it so far. There's a lot of differences in writing HTML in here comparatively, so check it out. You know, I can edit the HTML and I can actually see the result of the HTML as I'm writing it. That's kind of nice. There's a snippet available for just blowing away a document and bringing it back if you want to. As I'm writing, it's helping me out with the angle brackets. It's giving me type ahead for valid attributes for it. There's snippets available to quickly write the HTML more. There's syntax highlighting happening here. There's all kinds of things going on here. Nothing that's like totally innovative and not available in other code editors, but you can see the difference between attempting to write HTML and text edit versus using a more modern editor that's just loaded with little sprinkles of DX ideas. So here's one difference is because my job to be done as a developer was I need to write some HTML and see the results of it, there's a big difference in the tools already in that using CodePen, which is like literally for that job, there was some HTML already sitting there. I didn't even have to craft a basic document. It was just already there. The DX kind of lesson being, can you do that in the thing that you're building for developers? If you're building a thing for developers, can you just provide them pre-working state already? And you just give it to, I know what they want to do. It's that, here you go. Who knows what form that's in, but can you do that? Should you be doing that? That's great. This is the example of a satisfying, like that's a satisfying moment to just be like, here you go, you got that for free. I used this whole garage door thing in my keynote, but it's satisfying to me as a garage door opener owner that when I go out into my garage, the light turns on. That's not even the job of a garage door opener, but somebody decided that was a good idea, and I agree. It's just satisfying. It's just a bonus thing that piece of equipment is doing to me that I appreciate. Thanks, garage door opener. I like driving into a lit garage. In the context of CodePen, the app I work on, you can change all that. If you don't like that HTML, that's cool. You can just erase it and write your own. Or you can teach it that you have a different template that you want to start with. Or you could have started the pen to begin with from a different template. There's all kinds of things that you can do, but it's that default state that probably matters generally the most. Because this is just a quote. It's worth writing down. Nobody changes the defaults, ever. Just in my experience of any software ever, nobody's like, I'm just gonna pop through those settings and just see what I can change. Sure, some people do. Power users do. People that write to support do. But your average user, they just never even think about it. People are like, you can change the syntax highlighting theme on CodePen? You're like, for the last 15 years, you know? That's okay though, we knew that. We know that nobody sets it. It's the default that matters. That's what 90+% of people are ever going to do. Here's an example of giving users a common working state. This is so common these days to see, particularly on front-end frameworks, in my opinion, is some quick start kind of way. So if you focus in there, you'll see this command down there. If that doesn't mean anything to you, fine, but developers know what that means. It means, oh, I can run that on the command line, and it's gonna give me a common working state for the thing. Here's an example of how Astro does it, another framework that's in that market a little bit. They just give you this command to run. You're like, oh, I'm gonna do it. Okay, sounds good. Is it cool if I install some packages? Yes. It goes and gets some crap from NPM, and it asks you some questions. Not too many, because it knows too many would be obnoxious, but important ones, like, do you want to use TypeScript or not? I feel like that's worthy of asking, because developers, especially if you're doing something small and quick, maybe you don't want to mess with that, or you just hate it or something. Just some questions that tend to be pretty important for how you would scaffold a product. Then it actually goes to NPM and grabs a bunch of crap, and crucially, at the end of it, it spins up a little server for you. I'm doing very little work here. I'm just using the most basic of user interfaces, and then it's like, okay, well, I'll just CD in there and kick it off with the script that you provided for me, and I have a URL I can option click on or copy and paste into a browser, and I have common working state. The actual product of Astro is relatively complicated. It can do all kinds of crap. It has a folder structure that it expects you to use. It has files that have a unique file format that you have to do in a certain way. Otherwise, there's going to be syntax problems, and it's not going to build correctly and all that. That's okay, even though it's relatively complicated. At least they gave me that. So now I can just start to play with it from a known working state of a rather complicated thing. It seems like a simple idea, but it's pretty strong, Rather than being like, we have this complicated technological product. It can do so much cool stuff. Here it is. Good luck. It's way more powerful to give them a template, give them existing code. Here's a repo that already works. Just fork it. Just do it. What can you do for people, Shia LaBeouf said that. Nike liked it so much they picked it up later as a slogan. All right, another DX thing that I think is great is providing people help with coding. We're talking about DX. Tons of the work of being a developer is literally just being in your code editor, writing code. What can you do for those people that are in your code editor writing code? Can you do something? And it's related to those concepts. Make that task of coding feel fast and satisfying. Potentially less error prone too. Calling this the trifecta. There's 3 things that can really help. Providing snippets of some kind, common states of working code. Then there's the IntelliSense concept. It's not particularly new, sometimes called type ahead, based on language servers and all kinds of stuff. But it's helping you, it kind of guesses what you're doing based on typing and is giving you valid options for you to do. And then, of course, the whole AI thing absolutely factors into writing code these days. It's doing a lot. It's kind of unavoidable in code. So looking at them all 3 at the same time, in HTML, I'm going to start using a snippet here. It's just a tool called Emmet that happens to be built into CodePen, where you write in a special syntax. It gives you a preview of what you're doing, and it poops out valid HTML for you. Yes, pretty nice, thanks. Snippets can take other forms, though. Here I'm typing out some properties, and it's saying, oh, here's valid things that you're probably trying to do. That's the type ahead or IntelliSense thing. And then this gray text here is one of the UIs around AI that has come out. I think you're all pretty familiar with it. If you have GitHub Copilot installed or whatever, this is what it was teaching us to do. There'd be this gray ghost text, and you'd be like, yeah, that sounds about right. Tab. Ooh, thanks, Copilot. No, it's not a spot. But I think that's fascinating. Those 2 things they can work together well, but they do have some tension a little bit. Like if you're trying to type something out and IntelliSense wants to show you a drop-down of options, which one wins? The AI preview for it or the type ahead thing? Like who's deciding what's going to show and what's not going to show? I don't know. It's a balancing act, and it's all playing out just now. I guarantee whatever like the VS Code experience is now with all this stuff in there isn't how it'll be in a year from now. Like that's being played with, it's being figured out. How do you interact with all these things together? Because they all have unique value despite there being tension in there. Interesting to think about. All right, speaking of not new things, in the code editor, there was syntax highlighting sitting there, and I think that's a fascinating one. It does still matter. It's still like if your developer product has some kind of new syntax or something, some new file extension that your company's innovating because it has used the query language of the future or whatever crap you're working on, at some point, somebody's going to have to write a syntax highlighter for it. It's still a valid concept because the point of good syntax highlighting is that a developer's developing for any number of years can see when syntax highlighting is busted and doesn't look right, and it's just a quick hint that you're like, that's screwed up. I can tell. Why is that white? It's usually pink, so there's something wrong there. I think of those type of things in DX as rumble strips on highways, where you're just doing a little bit of something wrong. And maybe you're actively coding and there's something's wrong below where you're coding and the syntax highlighting is all messed up. It's the same thing as your car. You're mostly doing fine, but you've curved a little bit and it's just warning you a little bit that something's wrong, and you can be like, oh yeah, I got it, and fix it. In syntax highlighting, you can be like, don't worry about it. I got you, I'll fix it. It's the same kind of vibe. So that's expressing itself here. If I were to, like, in HTML, close the wrong colored tag in our high contrast theme that we wrote for CodePen, it's like, has an error-like color when there's a problem on purpose to help guide you towards seeing that immediately and fixing it. Same kind of thing. All right, good DX stuff. There's this guy named Jake just saying, you know what I like about DX? I like it when you make the right things easy. I totally agree. I think that's great. Give them a common working state, make scaffolding tools that produce accessible, performant code, have default options that are the fast option, not the slow option, do all that stuff. Think about making the right thing easy for people to do with your products. Hell yeah, absolutely. But there's this whole other side to it, that it's like, if there's something that you can do in your product that's kind of bad, or it's known to be slow, it's known to be dangerous, it's known to be inaccessible or something, it doesn't mean don't let them do it. It just means that's the other side of this so-called pit of success, is make it annoying to do that. Show them a warning. Make it a little unergonomic in some way to do that. It's two-sided. Make the right thing easy, make the wrong thing hard. Do that on purpose because you want people to be successful when they use their product. The pit of success, it's so called. I love this example from the React syntax. If you have a chunk of HTML and God knows where you got it, just deep in the bowels of your database, you got it from some third-party API, you got it because user typed something into a text area, you have some HTML, okay, you're just gonna put it on the page? You're just gonna put it there? That's XSS waiting to happen, right? That's somebody who's written a script that looks at your cookies and it reports the cookies back to some other server. That's dangerous stuff. Taking HTML that you've got from God knows where and putting it on the page is a security vulnerability. React knows that, and they said, if you just want to just take some HTML and just plop it on the page, we're going to make it obnoxious to do that. If you do that normally in React, it's just going to escape it all. So the script tag will have the scripts turned into characters that render them inert, and it's fine. But if you have that, but if you really know that you want to do it, because you're like, I'm sure it's from my own database, I wrote the HTML, if I'm hosing myself kind of thing. They let you do it. You can just render arbitrary HTML in React, but they make you use this dumb syntax, dangerously set inner HTML, and you have to pass it an object, and the object has a double underscore HTML key in it. They make it just a little obnoxious, but they're trying to help you. They're trying to poke you and be like, don't do that. Do it in some other way. So speaking of these like rumble strips and this type of thing, the ultimate DX concept to me is the red squiggle. The red squiggle is just, it shows up in code, it underlines something that's somehow wrong in your code, or something thinks it's wrong. It happens for all kinds of stuff. When you misspell a word, it can do that. It could be wrong because you've used some property of an object that doesn't exist, or you've whatever, done all kinds of stuff, or a build ran. Your syntax was incorrect and the build ran and it says, on line 32, you forgot a brace or something. A classic example of red squiggles is TypeScript. TypeScript loves to give you red squiggles for all kinds of crap. Oh, your variable is any, and you said that wasn't cool, or whatever. There's a million things, but it is actually trying to help you. It's not trying to be obnoxious, despite it being red squiggle, and you being like, no, I did bad coding. It's trying to just not stop the world, not break the universe. It's trying to just be like, down there, like the syntax highlighting thing, down there's a problem. Right? Here I've made a custom type in TypeScript with a name and a known for property. I've used it incorrectly for all things open. Instead of using the name property, I used the title property. Again, you've been coding for long enough, or even 5 minutes, I feel like you could look at that and be like, oh, I dinked it up. It's supposed to be name. But instead of there being a giant error, instead of there being 80 lines of terminal output, it's just a red squiggle. It's cool. I'll just change it to name and it'll be fine. Or if I don't see it right away, even though you can probably just see errors like that really quickly, just hover over it and it'll be like, oh, that's not assignable to type conference, you know, and whatever. You can see the full error if you click on it. It's like, it doesn't support that type of thing. It's trying to give you more information for that. Red squiggles are awesome. Can you ship something if your company has some kind of build tool thing that it makes or some special syntax or something? Can you build a VS Code plugin that red squiggles files for people? Some kind of linting step kind of thing? If you can, you should, because that's just a great push towards developer success. Help them. And it's kind of that number 4 concept. Is like, if something goes wrong, do you help them? Is it actionable? Yeah, with red squiggles, it totally is. At CodePen, when we were working on our build process and stuff for CodePen 2.0, it occurred to us that there's really a different, like there's red squiggles and that's fine, but we kind of drew a line in the sand and be like, red squiggles are when it like breaks the build. You're writing in Sass or something and you have invalid syntax for CSS and the input for the Sass program cannot run because it's broken syntax. And it'll be like on line 34 or whatever, there's some broken shit, fix it. Okay, red squiggle. But there's also this concept of linting and just general warnings. Even Sass itself can spit out stuff that's like, oh, you used margin twice or something. That's great, but it still produces output. It doesn't break the build. I feel like those are distinctly different, and there should be more tools that are better at distinguishing between red squiggle, serious problem, yellow squiggle. Take a look at that. I mean, that's a little color-centric, maybe not the most colorblind friendly. You could probably use spiky ones or something. But that's an example of it in CodePen. Any tool that we use that spits out something that doesn't break the build, we like hone in on a more warning-like, a more yellow color for those kind of things and just have them both there. Big fan. Squiggle it up. All right, so here's the thing. For developers, tend to be opinionated people, highly opinionated. You like it when when you can bring your own tools to things. It just happens to be a truth of it. And we talked about linting a little bit, yellow squiggles. We're going to talk about formatting a little bit. Tends to be people opinionated, want to bring their own tools. There was an episode of Silicon Valley about this, where he's like dating this girl and she's writing code and she hits the space bar to tab in code, which is not even a thing, but in the show it was. She was like, return, and the sound design of the thing really like made her hitting the space key really loud, and it like caused their whole relationship turmoil or whatever, because they were trying to play up this developers, tabs versus spaces. We like to fight about it. We don't actually like to fight about it. I actually made this street sign for my house at home, and we were like, tabs versus spaces, that's boring. What you actually want is just a tool to solve the problem for you. You know? There's already tools for this. I just want to bring the one that I like. I want to configure it once, and I want to never talk about this again. And you should know that the language Go ships with the formatter, and it's excellent, and it means that all Go code in the entire world is exactly the same, and it's great. You should Go format. Every language, if you're making a language, it better ship with the formatter. I demand it. It's great. And in fact, after that show aired, they analyzed GitHub repos and which ones use tabs versus spaces. Spaces is easily winning. I do have thoughts on, I was a spaces guy for a long time, but there's a little bit of an accessibility improvement for using tabs. And since I don't care and it's more accessible, tabs it is. Guess what Go uses? Tabs. Guess how many repos use spaces in Go? None, because it won't even compile. It's great. Anyway, Prettier's the big name in my circles because I'm just such a front-end guy. It does HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and TypeScript, and all that stuff. So Prettier's a big tool for all that. It's also, there's kind of a standard. Have you ever seen a .editor config file? It's the thing that says, I like tabs, I like them to be 4 spaces wide, yada, 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 that kind of thing. And Prettier can read that. That means if Prettier dies some days, and it will, because we're nerds, we rewrite crap all the time. There'll be a new formatter. The new formatter can read the standard, and we're still cool. Great. Let's watch formatting happen. It's a little bit like the syntax highlighting thing. It's a little bit like the squiggles. If your code is so jerked up that your formatter can't even run, that's yet another indication that you've made a problem. So now we have lots of stuff trying to subtly push us towards there's problems in your code. There's just the syntax highlighting itself, super chill. There's red squiggles when things run that are be like, I think I see a problem down here, and my formatter doesn't even know what you're trying to do type of errors. That's nice. There's just lots of things that go into writing code. Developers are super opinionated. I took a plane here, and I am one of apparently most people who have an opinion about where they sit on an airplane. I like to be an aisle guy, but apparently I'm in the minority. 2/3 of people like to sit on the window. I kind of get it. If I never peed, I would like to sit on the window too. That would be fine. But anyway, that's just a known thing. But in the software product of delta.com, you can express the fact that you're an aisle person or a window person or something. It doesn't matter that much because, of course, you're picking your seat when you're booking the tickets anyway. But if they need to change you or whatever, they're giving you an upgrade or something into the software system, they can honor the preference, which is actually kind of nice. Can you do that? Can you honor a preference in the software product that you're building in some way? Pretty cool. Now this list would probably be like 200 things longer than this, but because developers are super opinionated people, they probably have some back-end language that they like, and some code editor that they like, and the browser that they like, and a way of writing APIs that they like. They probably have all kinds of stuff that they prefer. It's not that we're not adaptable people and can use other things, it's just I have the stuff that I like. And if you're building a new tool and you're selling it to developers, it's kind of nice to be like, that's great. You should use the stuff that you like. If you force them down too many paths of stuff that they don't prefer, you're probably not going to sell a ton of them. So I think that's fascinating. Let's say you were going to make, for example, a new JavaScript runtime. I just picked one randomly. I really don't have any opinion in that. But let's say that was what you're trying to do. You've picked an opinionated path already. You're telling the people, use my runtime. I'm making it, so you should use that one. That's cool. That's super opinionated. Some people will like that. But then it should be unopinionated at like everything else. Like, can it run all the crap that a JavaScript runtime can do? Like all of it? Yeah, that would be nice. Will it work on all these different cloud providers? I don't want to be told that I just have to use Azure or whatever. That's fine if it supports that, but I don't like that. I want to use whatever I want to use. If there's some new syntax that I'm having, is there plugins for all that? Can it red squiggle? Can it do all those things? But I want it to be as little opinionated as possible about everything that it isn't. So that's kind of interesting. At CodePen, we're making a code editor, so we're opinionated about, like, you should try that code editor, but then try to be unopinionated about everything else. Bring whatever tools you want, export it wherever you want, that kind of thing. Be super opinionated about one strip of something and not opinionated about everything else. And I think people will like you for both of those things. When you're super opinionated about that thing, they might agree with you. Be like, hell yeah, I'm using your thing because I'm opinionated about that too, but we differ about everything else. They'll like the flexibility and the inflexibility. There's this, I'm not picking on them too much. I'm picking on them a little bit, but whatever, they're bigger than I'll ever be. But there's a framework in the JavaScript ecosystem called Redwood that's so opinionated about every possible thing you could be opinionated about that it just weirds me out a little bit. It's a React framework, but you know, and then it has back-end support for SSR and server-side components and stuff, so you have to have a Node background. You can't install it with NPM. You have to use Yarn for some reason. If you're building an API on it, it has to be GraphQL, and it's going to use Prisma on top of that, and you have to write in TypeScript, and it has a Babel build step for API stuff, and the server's in Vite, and if you're going to write tests, they're going to be in Jest, and if you're going to test, show that it's got every opinion you could possibly have. And I'm sure some people are like, hell yeah. Those are my 10 things too. I'm gonna use next or whatever. But that's a lot, and I feel like it's possible that they haven't really taken over because the amount of opinions is too many. Maybe, you know, maybe it will still win, but it feels like one of those things is gonna become uncool. Some of them maybe arguably already have, I don't know. But then that becomes a chink in the armor of your thing. You know, you're building some uncool thing. All right, part of what CodePen does, or that difference when we looked at what it's doing, is you're writing code and it was doing another thing, which is showing you the results of that code, which is a lot of times why people use it. It's a big aha moment, even for like kids and young students and people writing code for the first time. When they write like H1 hello world, H1 color red in the CSS and they see a big hello world in red, like, hell yeah, I just programmed that, And it takes a minute to know that. Like, if you're doing that in a text file and you had to save a file and hook them up and drag it onto a browser or like run a server or something, there's all kinds of little BS steps. Before seeing that, CodePen is nice in that way. It just, boo, there it is, it just works. But it enables this feedback. You can keep going. I can type hello world with exclamation points and almost instantly it's being shown there. And I say almost instantly on purpose because we have to do some work. We have to figure out your code and run it through processors potentially, and we even do weird stuff you wouldn't expect, like make sure there's no infinite loops in your code so it doesn't crash the browser and you can save your work and yada yada. But we have to do a little work and then we show you the results of that. And that's classic DX thing, is that people are working on DX forever, There's a concept in the JavaScript framework world called hot module reloading or fast refresh. It has different names and stuff that have slightly different characteristics, but that's really nice. It's nice to know that people work on that kind of thing because I want to write code here and look at the output here and ideally have that kind of be as fast as possible. That has implications in the back end as well. I'm writing code and it sees that I've changed whatever, like auth.rb or something. So it's gonna see that I have auth_test.rb and run my Ruby test just for auth or something. It's the same type of experience. I'm writing code and I'm seeing the result of that code over here, whatever that may be, terminal output or whatever. How fast should that be? I think everybody intuitively understands, like, I don't know, as fast as possible, I guess. Sometimes that's impossible. Sometimes test suites take 10 minutes to run. But that's why nerds have invented, like, well, the code that you changed only affects these tests, so I'm only gonna run those 4 tests or whatever. That type of stuff is really important to build into developer tooling, because I cannot wait 10 minutes to find out the results of this. I'm gone. I'm like walking around the block or something if something takes 10 minutes. I'm totally disconnected from the task that I was doing. Even in 1 minute, even in 20 seconds, the brain being what it is, I'm gone mentally. From knowing that. And it's not until you're down to like the few seconds that ends up being good. 3 seconds is probably the most annoying number on here, because you'd be writing code and be like, come on, okay, come on. It'll just constantly be obnoxious. It really isn't until 1 second where research shows that you mentally don't leave the task. Even at 3 seconds, I'll be like, and email, But at 1 second, you won't. You stay engaged in the task, and at 0.1 to 0.2 or 100 to 200 milliseconds, you're cool. That feels instant. To a user, it feels like nothing ever happened. No processing took place, nothing. It feels instantaneous, and that's what you're going for. I feel like for any developer product, you don't want to build in delays or take your time with stuff like that. You should always be fighting the fight to make the writing code to feedback loop as quick as you can possibly get it. All right, this is a cool book. It has nothing to do with command line interfaces, that's for sure. Or does it? It's called The Design of Everyday Things by Don Norman. The cover's kind of a joke. You probably aren't going to pour tea out of that teapot particularly efficiently. But he goes into talking about this concept of affordances in the book, which is a design concept where I just get it. Like, I could hand you my laptop, and even if you don't have this laptop, you'd be like, it opens like this, because there's a little thumb thing, and there's obviously a hinge on one side of it. So even though you don't have my laptop, you can open it. I can go to your house and use your stove. I've never used your stove, but I just get it, because there's a button. It's probably a little bit like my stove. That's kind of the concept of affordances. When you can build that into interfaces and products, that's nice. Just my guess of using it works pretty nicely. That's a totally different teapot, but it's one that works. You grab that thing that's red on the top, and it's a lid, probably. And then I put some hot water in there and steep tea. I don't own that teapot, but I can absolutely operate that teapot. No problem. All of these ones. That's a totally different one, but just the affordance of like, oh, it's metal and it's got a bigger ring on the bottom. That's the one, and then like the thing on the top is probably for like not making your hand too hot or whatever. That's the one that you put on the stove. Apparently you need 2 teapots to make tea. That's annoying. But of course, not always. That one's just electric, but I get it. You hold this thing and you pour it out. These things are generally pretty obvious. Although I did see this one at one time that's a teapot, and then it puts like ice crystals on the bottom of it when it's really hot, so you know. So you know? I don't know. I think this one's ridiculous. You're supposed to, it's supposed to be the thing that you serve from and the one that you put on the stove, but it makes you nervous because there's no handle. So you're like, when it's really hot, you just have to know that they've designed it, that you can touch it for some reason, but I'm sure it would scare you every time. You'd be like, but why is there no handle, you know? And then to make it blue, to make it literally look extra cold when it's hot is so preposterous to me. Anyway, don't do that. There's no affordances there. Build affordances into your product. Like, oh, I've seen this before. The API is probably whatever. Make clean HTML. This is a cool term that I like. The designer at Wufu, when I worked there a million years ago, taught me at one of his talks that was called, it's a Japanese term called poka-yoke, which is basically mistake proofing in interface. And the idea is, can I change something about this interface that makes it impossible to screw up? Meaning, if it was a setting, could we just not have the setting at all? Can't screw that up. It's not, can we make it more intuitive? That's nice too, but can you do something so extreme that you can't screw it up in any way? It's just a perfect interface in a way, like a one-button interface, that kind of thing. The example I put in here was, and this is funny because I did this during my keynote, and a guy came up to me, he's like, I got gas this morning, and this literally happened to me, which is hilarious. And then he's like, have you read The Design of Everyday Things? I'm like, you should come to my talk. I'm gonna say that. Anyway, gas stations have gotten a lot better. We used to have to like go outside and give somebody some money and then come back and then pump our gas or whatever. That's okay, but we improved it. Now you can just slide your card in or out, but you probably slided it the wrong way. I'll turn it around and try it again. Oops, it was upside down. It's still better. It's not like awful, but can we poka-yoke that? Can we make it impossible to screw up? Sure. We can at least do better. Now you just get your credit card in the vicinity of the thing, and it's better to do it. Now, I'm sure we've all seen there's ones where there's a symbol like that, and then like somebody's hand-scrawled note that's like, tap down here. It hasn't like been perfect, but I'd say it's better. It's in the right direction. You can still drop your credit card on the ground, but even that, people are like, you should just boop your watch. You can't drop that. There's things you can do to think about, like how can we make this experience that users have and just make it mistake-proof if you possibly can. I use this, apologies, I'm gonna do it again because I love this interface so much. This is from the movie Total Recall with Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's an incredible movie where he's like a construction worker who goes on vacation to Mars for some reason, and it's a really convoluted plot, but it's also amazing. And at the end, for some reason, he's tasked with like returning the atmosphere to Mars so people can live there as some kind of conspiracy theory. And this crazy alien comes out of this other guy's chest, and he tries to explain to him what his task to do. What he's tasked to do is to start the alien reactor to make atmosphere return to Earth. And Arnold's like, I don't know how to do that. I don't even know from Mars, or he has some cool line. But then he sees the interface for the reactor, and it's that. And he's like, oh, I get it. You just put your hand on it. And it totally works. That's the whole interface for the thing, is you put your freaking hand on it, and then you save Mars. But that's cool. Aliens can do it. You can do it. Make your interface that poka-yoked. That is a poka-yoked interface, for sure, I'd say. All right, let's look at some more stuff. Talking about deploying a website just for a minute. I like this one because to me it typifies that job to be done kind of thing. There's a book about that, but it's kind of like you should hone in on these things that your users are actually trying to do. Like they have something in their mind that they want to do, and they're going to freaking do it. And if they might use your tool, they might use some other tool, they might use a combination of tools, but like they have something in mind. So like how can you get in the way of that? Or like not get in the way, but be in their path when that happens. One of them is like, I have this freaking website and I need to get it online. It's a very clear job to be done. So I'm going to buy a domain for it at some point, and then I have all these other steps that I need to do. I also need to buy hosting. Those might not be at the same place. I have code. I got to put the code there. I got to configure things right. I got to do DNS stuff. I need a tool that's going to help me continuously put those files in the place that it needs to be. There's waiting involved at that first time because of DNS, but eventually I get a website. But it's all these steps. That's how, or at least that's how I think of it. That's how it kind of used to be in a way. But there's plenty of tools that have evolved that kind of looked at that job to be done, or at least I like to think that they did, and they identified like how many different tools are at play. There's the one where you buy the domain name. There's possibly a different one where you do the hosting, and there's probably some kind of tool that helps you connect the two or do the deployment part. So there's kind of 3 tools. This is just one. I attribute it to Heroku because that's where I first saw it like long ago. They were early in the like, I'm gonna have a good CLI and we're gonna help you with this. And their API was, you're already on the command line and building your website. We're gonna have one command that you run and it's just gonna, you're gonna, presumably you're already authed and stuff. It's gonna know who you are and it's just gonna deploy that website for you for the first time or the 500th time. And it's just gonna give you a URL and there's your website. And that was kind of an amazing moment because if you think of those jobs to be done and all those different tools we had to use, it just smashes them all into one. Instead of it being this complex thing, I was like, oh, I know what I'm in for here. This is gonna be a pain in the butt, but rock and roll, here we go. Turn 3 tools and 7 steps into 1 tool and 1 step. That was a genius move that they did there. Now it's not even rare anymore. Everybody just does that. Every good host has some kind of deploy step. It might even be better than that. It might even be hooked up to your GitHub, so you just deploy to master and it gets committed. But that's nice. Those are like modern conveniences that we learned by doing good DX. Now there's some DX happens that isn't necessarily right on the path of the job to be done, but it's something around it. The classic example of that is documentation. That's something that I might need, I might not, but I probably need, or I'm gonna someday need, and it just has to be good. Some people argue that DX is mostly documentation. Like your thing better as hell be well documented. I look at this example from Airtable that I think does a pretty good job, is that they show me all the docs and all the different things that I can do, but they're showing me the docs like for the exact database table that I'm looking at, which I think is kind of cool, is there's different ones. And so it's showing me a scope down docs for just my one table. And it allows me to like put my API key in there for me. Not the world's best practice, you have to turn it on, but then it gives me code that I can copy and paste and just run and see that the API is doing what I want it to do. It's a nice little friction remover that I think is nice in their doc, little nice touch of DX. Again, it's specific to the specific table that I'm looking at. This API is for that table. And then, but what could be better than that? That's kind of where they stop. But it's pretty good, like thumbs up. But if we're thinking of this and we're worried about DX, what are we gonna do? Well, why don't you run it? You already got the code sitting right there. A server served this page. Why don't you run the code and show me the results of it? Wouldn't that be cool? I just think it would be, at least when we're brainstorming, like what could this do? What would that be better? You run it for me. I wanna see the results of that. Make it editable too. That's already a code editor of sorts. Let me edit it and mess with it and then run it. Can you do that safely? That would be nice so that I know what's possible with your product. What's better than that? Why don't you just host it for me then? Why don't you let me have custom code that I run to get the data from your product? That would be helpful to me. You store data, let me get it out in the way that I want to get it out. What's better than that? Poutine. Incredible. Have you been to Canada? Fuck. It's so good. Anyway, that's all the time we have together anyway. Thank you very much for attending my talk. Back to your regularly scheduled programming.